I know for a good on fact that I'm not the only one who has a deep-seated hatred for the show Dora the Explorer, right? Honestly, the whole show was a huge pain in my ass growing up, even when I was a small child. Yeah, the show, its concept, and even the constant repetitive songs and questions made even my 5-year-old brain want to sit there and go up to my TV and smash it with a fucking sledgehammer until it was nothing more than broken glass scattered all over the carpet. Yeah, you know you fucked up on a show when even a toddler like myself wants nothing to do with it and is willing to particularly destroy his own television just to stop it. And if that was the case, and that was the case with me. Honestly though, that leaves me with a question. If that was my case, then why in the ever-living hell did this show ever gain so much popularity as it did? Why? It, even to this very day, baffles the hell out of me that a show like this could have the same repetitive episode lineage, boring storylines, annoying as hell characters, and not to mention contrived concepts and lack of villains. Well, I mean, there's Swiper, but even he gets pretty much the butt end of the stick just for pretty much existing. And not only that, but he's not even a good villain in any way. And of course, still sit there and have a full-on series that to this day is still popular, of various various TV movies, and hell, even a full-fledged movie on screen just based off of this character that has annoyed me and countless millions for years. It's a huge, baffling feeling, and I'll never understand it. But anyway, rant aside, the show was pretty much was the one thing that I truly could say I never really cared throughout my childhood and teenage years. And I don't think that it'll ever truly be the case of me ever caring for it for a very long time. Unfortunately for me, that time that I thought I'd have with never seeing the show again was cut short when my little sister won those fucking tickets. Let me explain. My parents have a tendency to overly pamper and spoil my little sister Emily. Throughout her young life, just by virtue of her existing and being there in our family, they would pretty much pamper her in a lot of ways. Now don't get me wrong, they did the same thing to me when I was younger, when I was first born, but seeing them do that again in a more vigorous way was something that I even knew was going to put a lot of things in her head that really shouldn't be there, like extreme entitlement and the like. As if we don't have enough entitled kids nowadays. Or in this case, more entitled adults. Now, as I've already mentioned above, my parents gave Emily whatever it was that she wanted, no matter what it was. She saw a toy that she liked, she got it. When she wanted to eat at McDonald's, she got to eat it. It was a rather unhealthy repetitive circle that only fueled my sister with more wants rather than needs. One especially interesting moment was a sweepstakes offered by a Nickelodeon company not too far away from us via the mail that they were having. The sweepstakes was a simple tour around the studio and getting to meet a couple of voice actors from a couple of Nick Jr. shows, followed by lunch at the cafeteria with a couple of vouchers and things like that. All of which were completely free. My sister was ecstatic when she first found out about the whole thing, and practically begged my parents to sign her up for it, which they did in a heartbeat. About a week after had passed after that little entry, and surprise, surprise, my sister wound up getting a letter from the company claiming that she had won the sweepstakes. Once it was fully confirmed by my father after reading the letter that she had truly won, he told the both of us to go upstairs and pack up a few things for the weekend so that we could all have a little bit of a family trip. I, as you would expect, wasn't very thrilled to go. I mean, sure, it was kinda cool to see the studio and everything, but I wasn't too particularly crazy about cartoons at the time, especially since I had turned 14 that year, and was more focused on other topics and even schoolwork. Yes, I was a nerdy kid. Sue me. However, no matter how many times I protested about me going with my parents, they would particularly lecture me and tell me that it wouldn't be fun there without me, that I'm part of the family as well, and other yada 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 stuff. The typical parent guilt trip scenario that nearly all parents have been dishing around for God knows how many centuries. So with their hands tied, I pretty much did exactly as they told me to do, and packed up a couple of essentials for the weekend. The very next day, I was in a rather pissed off mood, mostly for my little sister keeping me up all night, watching her goddamn Dora DVDs all night. And if you're wondering, yes, we share a room together, and yes, I hate it with a passion. So after a crappy breakfast of cornflakes and toast, we were all off to the studio, which was luckily an hour's drive from my house. Honestly, that was a good thing that it didn't take too long, because there's only so much an average human being can sit there and take before listening to Dora the Explorer's theme song over and over on repeat on the radio, or in this case a CD player. Upon making our way to the studio, we were all met with a male employee who introduced himself as Riley, and told us all that he was the one that was going to give the tour for us. Now, funny thing about Riley, he looked as though he was one of those unpaid interns that got forced into sitting there and working for whatever employee over him for free. Short, really thin, wore a white button-up shirt that looked a lot more baggier than it should have been on him. He had long, messy black hair tied up in a ponytail, and a face that basically screamed that he was completely and utterly dead inside and really didn't want to sit there and be there. Honestly, I felt kind of bad for the guy. And the fact that he was forced to do what it was that he was made to do on there really kind of upped that, though. Riley then proceeded to take us throughout the studio, barely even able to keep up a joyful expression and tone as he led us through the various rooms that he worked into, including a couple of editings and animation rooms, which were nice. There we actually got to meet a couple of voice actors, including the one that had played Dora, and we even took a few pictures with them. After that, it was around time for lunch. The intern took us to the main cafeteria into the studio for us to go and eat at, before handing us a few food vouchers to pay for our food. Each of us received one of them, and when I looked down to see what it was good for, my day only sank down further into the bottomless pit of hell itself. The only two meals that I could get were either a small slice of meatloaf with mashed potatoes and corn with a milk, or 2 chicken tenders with the same items included. Now, it wasn't so much the options that were the most insulting, even though I really hate meatloaf with a passion, but also the fact that it was a kid's meal. I'm not kidding any of you. It was a fucking kid's meal. Turns out, my little sister had gotten the better voucher mixed up with mine, and of course, I tried protesting to them that, this was meant for her, but my parents, of course, didn't listen and allowed her to pretty much use the voucher that I was supposed to get, and proceed to get anything that she wanted, including a large dessert. Well, I got the small chicken tenders and other items as well. Yeah, it was already too tiny enough to fill me up, but honestly at this point, I didn't give really much of a shit. I had already kind of lost my appetite after that. I had already eaten what was given to me, didn't take me too long, and then asked my dad if I could go to use the bathroom, to which he said yes. Now, whether or not it was from the lack of food in my system going to my brain, or was just me being a dumbass at the time, I wound up going into the wrong direction in the studio where the bathroom was supposed to be, and then wound up walking into a random door that I thought was vaguely the bathroom. Now, normally this would embarrass the hell out of me when I think about it, if there was any people there that was in that room. But what I wound up walking into was something that I could say was the only highlight of my day. The room was rather large, with row after row of open boxes, film reels, and other various items that caught my attention. I went deeper into the room and soon saw various sections marked off and labeled with multiple drives, CDs, and even a few tapes in each and every single box that was in that specific one. Labeled in a specific show, they all went as follows: SpongeBob, The Backyardigans, Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life, Hey Arnold, Rocket Power, Breadwinners, and many more Nickelodeon shows. This was a bit of a treasure trove to me, and I was pretty curious to know what the hell was on these things. My mind then hatched an interesting idea, and after a bit of searching around, I wound up coming across a box, this one was a lot smaller, entitled Dora the Explorer. That right there was my jackpot, and I didn't hesitate to dig through the thing and immediately grab something out of there at random before immediately leaving the place. For anybody wondering what it was a flash drive. Once I had left the room, I immediately made my way back to the bathroom as I really had to go at that point. Did my business and then went back to my parents, who then asked me why I had taken so long. I basically gave them a bullshit story about the food, pretty much giving me the runs. Which, of course, they believed almost instantly, pretty much wanting me to sit there and stop talking about it, as it was pretty gross. The rest of the tour went by without much of a hitch after that. I hid the driver into my pocket and nobody noticed me doing that. I wound up meeting a couple of staff members, including Stephen Hillenberg himself when he was still alive, and then my family and I went back to our hotel room for the night. And we stayed there for the weekend, doing a bunch of other random stuff. So at least then it wasn't entirely bad. Once our little vacation time was done and over with, and we had finally made our way back home, I took the USB drive out of my pocket when I got into my room and looked at it for a good few minutes, wondering what the hell was on it. Then just as I was about to put the thing in my computer to really kind of analyze the files and see what was there, I wound up feeling a heavy amount of guilt eat away at me. I mean, I had just stolen something from a major studio. Likely my own thing being on footage, and here I was about to watch something that may have been classified or some shit like that. I didn't know. I was a 14-year-old kid. So out of pure fear and panic, I wound up taking the USB drive and throwing it into my sister's drawer and left it like that. That is, until she wound up finding it, and while I was at school at the time, she didn't go to school just yet, she took it over to my laptop and watched whatever the hell was on it. Needless to say, when I went home that day, my sister was rather, how do I put this properly, unresponsive. She didn't really say anything to me or my parents or pretty much the whole day I'd gotten back from school. She simply just watched TV without a word, and anytime anybody would talk to her, the only thing that she would ever really do is just nod her head in a yes or no motion when asked. I was a bit confused about the whole thing and why she was acting like that, until I wound up going into my room and finding my laptop completely open with a USB drive shoved into it. A part of me was rather pissed off that she had used my laptop without my permission, but another part of me was surprised at how she even managed to put everything on there, despite her being rather young and a little bit inexperienced with computers. Then again, she probably saw me do it a couple of times since we did share the same room together, so she might have, just put it in there and just started looking around. Now, thankfully it was Friday, and I didn't have any homework or anything to get done, so I quickly hopped onto my laptop after putting my bag down and wound up checking the contents of the USB drive to see if there was anything on it that was of interest. Well, there were a couple of encrypted files on there, mostly which I couldn't even get into, but I also wound up finding a few video clips as well. Curious, I clicked on one of the videos and inserted my headphones into my ears and began watching. The episode began with the typical Dora the Explorer theme song, rather loudly I might add. My first instinct that came by when I heard the damn theme song was, fuck this. Yeah, I wasn't really in the mood to watch a piece of shit show that I hated with every ounce of my being. But of course, I was going to take the USB drive out, but I wound up hearing my parents start to argue downstairs with my sister, and I decided that since I was going to be in my room for the time being, I decided to just go on ahead and sit there and watch it. Honestly, it was a lot better to just deal with a shit show that I hated than have to walk in on family drama and get involved into it. I would honestly prefer that rather than the latter, let me tell you. So, once I had put the headphones back in, I pretty much braced myself for whatever show this was gonna give me. But come another where's the mountain question, things like that, I was going to punch a deep hole in my computer screen. Once the intro had finally ended, I was met with the startup of the show, with Dora and Boots standing next to Dora's home, staring at the screen ready to give their lines. Hola, soy Dora, Dora said in her usual upbeat voice. And I'm Boots, Boots said. We want to thank you for coming today. You see, mi familia is having a very important fiesta today. Because my family and I are moving into the big city very, very soon, Dora said. We better go get packing, Dora. Don't want to have your family waiting for too long for the fiesta, Boots said as he made his way over towards the front door with a huge stupid grin on his face. I'm coming, Boots, Dora exclaimed as she made her way over towards the front door and opened it, making her way inside of the house with her monkey friend. I simply groaned aloud when I started watching the thing. So far it was already 2 minutes in and I already felt like feeding myself to a pack of rabid ferrets. I wasn't expecting much else from this episode. Honestly, I should have thought this over a lot more before I started playing the damn thing. Once Boots and Dora made their way inside the house, it was shown that there was nothing in there, which is rather odd given how there weren't any boxes anywhere and apparently they were moving. However, Dora and Boots didn't really seem to mind this too much, and then began making their way into the kitchen, where, again, it was completely empty. Dora then approached the counter and asked her mother if she could find a couple of boxes for her room. I was thoroughly confused now, given the fact that Elena, Dora's mother, was nowhere to be seen near the kitchen, and yet Dora was just standing there talking to a spot that was vacant and empty like she was there. I was concerned, but Dora simply stood there listening, apparently, and then thanked her mother and then proceeded to go over towards a closet and start pulling out some cardboard boxes. Once they grab them, they immediately exit the kitchen, and then proceed to go up the stairs and into Dora's room. During their way there, Dora and Boots then proceed to greet Cole, Dora's father, and Soledad, Dora's grandmother, who were also missing from the scene entirely. Honestly, at this point, I was starting to get a little weirded out from this episode. Apparently, in one way or another, Dora had gone fucking insane and was now starting to talk to absolutely nothing. Dora and Boots then proceeded to go into Dora's room, and then, after a little bit of a conundrum, asked the audience if they could help her get to the post office and the store, well, specifically the store, to go and get some tape and other groceries that were needed to help pack her things and supply some stuff for the fiesta. She waits her usual time and then answers with a "Great!" before asking, "Who do we ask for help when we don't know which way to go?" There's a short period of silence for a bit before Dora smiles and then answers, "That's right, the map," Dora said. Then in an instant, after Boots himself said, say map," the map itself popped out of the holster from the backpack, and then proceeded to sing his trademark "I'm the Map" song before going into the main details of where the two were supposed to go in this episode. I'll spare you the agonizing details about it, and simply say that it involved going into a dark forest, the troll bridge, and lastly, the store. Then, once the map proceeds to, as I call it, eat the whole screen, the scene then immediately faded back to show Dora and Boots making their way to each location, singing their "Where Are We Going" song in the process. Now, for the majority of this episode, it all goes out the same. Pretty much the same way you'd expect with any Dora episode. The two make their way into the place in question, they do a thing, and then they move on to the next spot. Nothing really that out of the ordinary, with the sole exception of one thing. Every place that she goes to, there's nobody there. No joke. Just like in the house, there was nobody there to greet her, or any voices, or even any of her friends showing up. Minus Dora and Boots, but that's about it. Even when Dora reacted in a way that she would normally would when dealing with a specific issue, like, say, the troll bridge, for example, there would be nobody there to answer back or sing any of the songs or whatever, despite the music playing in its place. This was especially freaky when it got to the point where Swiper was supposed to come in and try and take their things, if they even had any. Dora and Boots then said the same lines like they usually did, "Swiper no swiping," and, well, won, I guess. But like with everything else, there was no answer. There was no, "Oh man," there was nothing. Just the same sound that it showed when Swiper ran off. This continued on for a good portion of the episode until finally having a change after Dora and Boots sing the "We Did It" song. Now normally the show would cut after the little clicker mouse would click on Dora or Boots, but in this episode that didn't happen. In fact, once they land on the ground, Dora then starts making her way back to the same route that she had entered into with Boots. Only this time, she was alone. Boots wasn't there with her, and she seemed to look rather upset. This continues until she finally gets back home, only to find the entire place at night and her home in complete shambles, like it hadn't been used in years. She entered into the front room and then made her way up the stairs and into her bedroom, everything else looking about as old and dilapidated as it is. It's then that Dora starts to cry as she enters the bedroom, before making her way up to her bed, which, shockingly enough, was still intact, and said, "I had fun today. What was your favorite part of the trip?" Dora asked. There was no response, and the lack of response only seemed to make her sadder than she was. Then, without any warning, she plopped down under her bed and cried into her pillow, bawling like she had lost everything. The screen then slowly pans out of the house, and then out into the scene of the forest, before immediately panning out entirely to show nothing there but the forest and the house right dead center, before finally going all the way up to the moon, cutting to black, and then ending. I was rather confused after watching that episode, I can't deny that. Honestly, this episode, while not particularly horrifying, was definitely a lot more unnerving and weird to say the least. Why exactly was Dora and Boots alone? Was this episode not finished or something? I had a lot more questions that kept on popping up in my head each and every second of the day, but the only thing that I really did after watching that episode was taking the USB drive out and placing it back on my sister's drawer. Well, actually, more or less putting it on top of her nightstand. Now, originally I was going to take the drive out and analyze it the next day, and maybe take a few screenshots. However, when I woke up the next day, I found it to be gone. My parents then angrily called me down into the kitchen and then proceeded to start yelling at me when I arrived there. I was really confused as to why the hell they were yelling at me, but I was quickly answered when a few police officers walked into the kitchen. I was pretty much shitting bricks at this point, and my 14-year-old mind honestly had no idea what the hell to say or what the fuck to do. My father wound up seeing my face and then proceeded to tell me that when they had woken up earlier than I did, the police had shown up at their doorstep, told them about the theft that I had made, even going so far to show them the CCTV footage, and demanding that the driver be returned. I, of course, had no idea where the hell the driver was at, until my little sister wound up popping behind me and then handing it to the police officer. Thankfully, I wasn't arrested on the spot for theft, and there was no charges brought onto me. However, I was heavily lectured by the police and then by my parents for another 2 hours, and then made to write an apology note in front of them to the higher-ups, and then printing it out and apologizing for taking something that wasn't, mine. Yeah, they basically treated me like I was a 3-year-old at this point. And to make matters worse, I was grounded for 2 months. Why 2? Well, I got 1 month for stealing the driver out of the studio, and then I got another month for scaring the shit out of my sister with the episode, despite that not really being my fault to begin with, as she had taken it and watched it herself. My family, since then, including my sister, has extreme trust issues with me now, and I can't even really go with them anywhere without them supervising me to make sure of it that I don't take anything. This continued on until I wound up moving out at the age of 16. I haven't really had too much contact with them after that, and the fact that they still have that giant grudge against me for that one incident I did when in my early teens is kind of pathetic when I think about it. But even then, though, I guess I kind of did get what I deserve. I mean, probably next time around if I ever go to that place, I'm not going to sit there and take anything that, well, at least of that kind of value. Well, as long as I don't get caught, that is.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping, horror-driven, nightmarish, gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.